the call now and let the representatives explain everything to you. Our licensed insurance agents can offer you a variety of Medicare Advantage plans. Plus, the call is free, the information is free, and there's no obligation to enroll. We're here to make it easy for you to select a Medicare Advantage plan that may work for your needs. Finding a Medicare Advantage plan can be easy if you do what I did. Make a quick call right now to learn more. Thank you. Call 800-749-7781. That's 800-749-7781. Call now.
Fue un enorme placer que estuvieras aquí en mi programa y regresa muy pronto.
Welcome to Tech Talk, brought to you by Now Media Networks. Join host Greg Schaffer as he takes you into the fast-paced world of technology, exploring breakthroughs in AI, cybersecurity, and beyond. Discover the strategies and insights driving today's tech revolution.
Wireless and robotics, these are two technologies that continue to accelerate. And they do so because they bring value and convenience to our lives. With us today is Jim Bradfield joining us again. He is the CEO and director of NAS Wireless. Jim, thank you so much for joining us again today.
My pleasure, sir.
So I know we've discussed before in a few of the previous segments that your family's been involved with wireless for over 100 years now. And a lot of our conversations have centered around the wireless networks that are supporting robotics and automation for a whole variety of industries. And we've also touched upon the security needs for those networks and those configurations. I'd like to dive a little bit more into what are some of the cybersecurity issues that your teams are actually seeing with automated robotics in a variety of these industries.
Yep. Well, it turns out that the most targeted industry for cybersecurity issues and breaches and things like that is starting in 2023 was manufacturing. It accounts for almost 27% or so of attacks. So, and this is because everything has been set up with IoT functionality. That's the Internet of Things, and most of that is connected via wireless. And it turns out that a lot of that is on a separate wireless network and is not secured. And what typically happens is that, these networks go out, and communicate with other things. They're not part of the secure network within the company. So they're on their own. If somebody has messed up the security requirements, the programming, not put in the right security for the wireless itself, it gets hacked. And, it turns out that it's a pretty big deal. People are going to be spending $24 billion a year to do updated robotics and automation. And, that's a real big deal. And this is a really simple thing. Things get hacked, like, for example, the automated robot in a car, like a Jeep Cherokee, for example, the sensors in the wheels facilitate the wireless communication. Well, it can be exploited by a hacker. And essentially what happens is the guys get in there, they connect, and they actually make things move about. And they make a real mess of, for example, the car can go anywhere. It can stop, it can start, it can do things that you want it to do. Well, imagine if you're building something in a robotics network over in, in a manufacturing plant. Well, I mean, heck, a single error that happens to the network, the whole thing goes out. It could be deadly for somebody. And that's a really big deal. And so cyber criminals actually get in there and do a hell of a lot of mess for everybody. And that's really what happens. The sensors are vulnerable to ransomware. They get malware, it's unsecured and whatever. And, you get a hijacking, you get a signal modification, you get intentional attacks. You get things like that where they can even steal the information. It's really a big deal. So that's something that has to be addressed.
When we're talking about wireless networks, we could talk about the in manufacturing, for example. So in my mind, I'm imagining like a factory floor or something like that, where you got all sorts of robotic machines that are doing all sorts of things, assembling something. And you're talking about wireless communication between them. Well, most people think about wireless, they think about one of two things. They think about your Wi-Fi, like at your Starbucks, for example, or they think about the cell phone. So that sort of like wireless voice communication. Is the technology the same that's used within manufacturing, or is it as something completely specialized for these environments?
Well, it's supposed to be specialized for the environment. For the network side that doesn't operate with robotics, it's completely secured and been secured for years and years and years. But what happens is the same kind of network is used on robotics, but it's usually managed by the robotics people themselves, and they don't secure it properly. So that's what happens. The breach that we used to be getting, there's been 70,000 breaches from companies last year alone, just through their wireless networks. I mean, that's a lot. So that's the biggest issue. They're not properly secured.
So then this almost sounds like that it's a third-party risk management issue where you have the robotics vendor that is responsible for maintaining and managing not only their equipment but also the connections, and that's not something that's managed usually by the company itself, the manufacturer itself.
Usually not. No, that's usually subbed out to those guys who do the manufacturing of those robots and support those robots. And the biggest there is, they don't follow procedures that you would in a typical company. I mean, you've got to, so really what needs to happen is, they need to air gap these things if possible. The manufacturer just has to have better defaults for IoT so that nothing is actually able to get into the system to breach it. And, they have to have the access limited. They don't limit the access to the robotics as much as they should. They need to make sure that, there's no human error. And what happens is they get the phishing attacks like we talked about before. All the other things that happen in other networks are now happening on these robotics networks because now they're behind in corporate security, right? They're not doing the same things. They're not doing built-in access controls as well as they could. They're not doing multi-factor authentication. They're not training their employees to be really careful about, phishing attacks and things like that. And all of that kind of stuff, really actually causes a problem. And even when you have the preventive measures going, robots can still suffer the breach. They could have a problem with the lines of code that have been upgraded to them and things like that. And it's like, when Cisco has a network, for example, and they send out a bug release and quick fix this. Well, if they don't fix that, then there's a bug problem, and the code can be attacked. And it's relatively straightforward and simple, but they just don't do it, and they don't encrypt all the robotic data. You need to encrypt everything, all the data, just like you would in the regular network, and then develop a plan for that.
So what can the business do then? Those are all wonderful things that we need to do to be able to secure the network, but how can the business ensure that the robotics vendor is actually performing these actions? Because ultimately, if you don't have your robotics working properly, you're going to suffer your business loss if you can't manufacture your widget, for example. There's got to be something that the business can do, even if they're not managing the network themselves.
Yeah, the typical thing that they need to do is they need to actually develop a plan with the robotics manufacturer and with the guys who are supporting all that. They could be an entirely separate group within the company typically, right? And what they need to do is do an incident response kind of a plan and a full out plan that you would do. The thing that we used to do probably 10 or 15 years ago when we first started security on these networks, that's what they need to really do. They need to start getting those plans out. And, they need to have a regular review of their security posture and all of the plans. And that's not happening. And they have to train the employees really well to understand and make sure that the access is limited, that there's not a whole bunch of guys coming in with, bring your own phone device kind of thing and connecting to the network. And, and they work closer with the manufacturer, and they can work with guys like us, man, guys like you. I mean, that's what we do, right? We fix the cybersecurity issues, and we help them make sure they have a plan to work with the manufacturer.
Well, you bring up an excellent point about the business continuity, and I was actually about ready to ask it, so I think you read my mind. We always encourage businesses to perform tabletop exercises for business continuity purposes at least once a year, more if necessary, so that you learn your gaps beforehand. But I think that what you're bringing out is that it's critical to involve those third-party providers, in this case, the robotics vendors, because if they're critical to your business, you can't just assume that system is going to be operational.
That's correct. Yeah, it's not necessarily going to be operational because they have to look at all the lines of code as well, and all the things that they've actually put in there, the things that they've updated. The most recent things they've updated could have a bug in them. They could have put the wrong kind of code in there. That's something that's not operational for them. They just got to be really careful. And I think the closer you work with your manufacturer and with companies like us, like you, to make sure that this thing is looked at on at least every 6 months. It's more often, even a pen test or something like that, something for that group that's special to that group to make sure they don't get any, they don't have any openings and get any attacks. And that's what needs to happen.
Absolutely, and just to remind our viewers as well too that because this is wireless, the attacker doesn't necessarily have to be within the facility to exploit any sort of vulnerability. It's wireless. There have been numerous accounts over the last decades, I guess you could say now, of criminals sitting out in the parking lot and hooking into a wireless network and then doing nefarious things or grabbing grabbing information, and certainly that could be an issue as well too. Now, you mentioned penetration tests. Just quickly, what would be one of the aspects that the business might expect from a penetration test on their robotics wireless networks that they would need to do?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we typically do with that is we do it like we do in a human test, right? Where we're actually going through and we're conducting whether or not that thing is taking a look at what's coming in from the outside and whether it's actually responding to any outside command. And you have to run through everything just to see what's going on. It's just like the human test, and the human guys also are actually manipulating it, and they work on the network itself. And if they click on a phishing attack or anything else like that, and so we kind of combine not only a phishing, but a penetration test to see what's happening, what we can get in the network. And, and also we go over that with them as well and make sure that they understand what they did, because they may never know. And it could lay dormant for months, right? You just don't know when that's going to happen.
Right. Well, if they needed to get a hold of you, wanted to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way?
jbjr@naswireless.com. And they can call me at 925-382-0410, and I'm happy to take it.
And naswireless.com is your website, right?
That's correct, sir.
Yeah, it's easy to remember. Well, Jim, appreciate you again sharing your wisdom and your experience with us and our viewers, and certainly that helps everybody stay more secure.
Right. Hopefully so.
And we'll be right back.
Thanks, buddy.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more cutting-edge discussions and tech insights on Tech Talk, only on Now Media TV.
Investing in real estate doesn't have to be a pipe dream, but how do you find, analyze, renovate, finance investment properties without getting ripped off? My name's Andrew Glisson. In 4 short years, me and my team built a portfolio of 200 rental properties in multiple cities as a hobby while working full-time. We took all of that experience and built a mentorship program called the Victory Strategy to unlock every step of investing in real estate. If that sounds like the opportunity you've been waiting for, look us up at thevictorystrategy.com.
Are you on Medicaid and in need of bladder control and incontinence products? Then stay tuned for a free offer from Active Style. At Active Style, we understand your needs and offer convenient home delivery of incontinence products for children and adults. And they may be available at no cost to you if you're Medicaid eligible. Our products have a super absorbent core that locks away wetness to keep you dry.
If you're on Medicaid, call now for your free sample.
We're back with Tech Talk, where we continue to dive deep into the innovations that are transforming industries and reshaping the world, only on Now Media TV.
Welcome back to Tech Talk. You know, information security has been around for a while, but it hasn't always been around. When I first started in the field of IT, it was more of a struggle to get things to talk to each other as opposed to stopping them from talking to each other. But now, of course, we need to do that because we need to ensure that information is protected, privacy is protected, and it's been an interesting journey. And here to talk a little bit about the evolution of information security is Peter Gregory, our friend who has been on with us before. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, it's a pleasure being here and good to see you again.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts. As I just mentioned in the intro, InfoSec has been around for a while, but in the early days, it was a struggle almost to get things to talk to each other. But it has evolved a lot since the beginning, wherever the beginning may be. How has the information security landscape evolved since you first entered the field?
Oh boy, I've thought about this, Greg, as I've looked back over my career. So I started full-time work in 1979, although I did part-time work in university computing centers and other facilities since the mid-70s. And the internet didn't exist yet. I'm not even sure ARPANET was around. And back then, security meant that you kept the door to the raised floor mainframe computer room locked, and you made sure that you knew who had all the keys, and that's what security was.
Right.
This is way before PCs and so forth. So what I've noticed from then till now is, antivirus came out in kind of the mid to late 80s. Then the other thing that got my attention in the later 80s was the Morris worm.
Yes.
That was the first worm, and it was destructive in that it was disruptive. It didn't really damage anything, but it got a lot of people's attention. It got my attention, and it gave me some pause to think that, oh yeah, security, okay, that's important. And at that same time, I was programming systems that were talking TCP/IP, and we were connected to the internet. So, it wasn't called the internet yet. So that definitely got my attention. And then things started to pick up in the late 80s. I was one of the first users of Tripwire in about 1991 or 92, I think.
Yeah.
When let's see, Gene Kim was a master's student working for Gene Spafford, and that's where Tripwire was born. And then shortly after that, then we had IDS, although I was trying to remember the name of the first IDS that we had when I was at McCaw Cellular. And then there's just been this steady increase of both threats as well as preventive capabilities. And today, what I think we're witnessing is a situation where the security vendors and the tools and all the offerings are vastly overbuilt. And it's the model today isn't sustainable. There's a lot of vendors and thousands of tooling and service vendors, and they're charging ever higher prices, and it's just not sustainable. I think that we're going to see another reckoning in the tools space and security. The stronger ones are going to be acquired. The weaker ones are going to just go away. We've seen in my career, security became a part of my job title in 2000, and we had virtually no laws to use as leverage. So we had to be a lot more persuasive than we do today, because back then security was a good idea, but it was not the law. And today it is the law, although there's problems with that as well.
Well, there's been a lot of advances certainly along the way. You mentioned Tripwire, and if I'm remembering correctly, Tripwire was, and I think still is that file integrity?
Still is. Yep.
Still is. Okay.
It's a FIM tool among only a small selection of FIM tools.
So you had file integrity monitoring to make sure that the files they contained the right information it's supposed to. It wasn't changed. You mentioned intrusion detection systems, IDS. So a lot of technological advancements that have happened, and yet you're thinking that we're kind of reaching like a plateau, or we're overweighted, too heavy on top with regards to our tool set today. But throughout all of this, and even maybe going forward, what would you think are some of the more impactful advances that have come in information security from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, good question, Greg. And of course, everyone is going to say AI, right? And I'm going to go with that, but it's still early days in AI. We're still trying to figure out, what is it? How can it help us? And how can it help us safely without hallucinating and just getting us into more trouble than we were trying to avoid in the first place, right? But prior to AI, I'd say that from my perspective, the most impactful capabilities would be the two big add-ons to the SIM systems. That is, system. What is it? Security information and event management.
Right.
The central log collector that produces alerts for the analysts who need to go and act on those and look into things. So the two capabilities are SOAR and TIP that are kind of an adjunct to a SIM. SOAR being security orchestration and automation. I don't remember what the R is. But
resource, I don't know.
What SOAR basically does is it, prior to a SOAR, when a SOC analyst got an alert or an alarm from their SIM, then they would go and open their playbook for the kind of event it was, and might have 5 or 10 or 15 different manual things they have to do, like looking up an IP address and looking at a route to something and looking at the identity of a system, and where in the world is that IP address that's talking to us. And with a SOAR system, you can script all that so that when the alert comes up, the SOAR system immediately presents all the information to the analysts, and in some cases will even either just trigger the response, or it will prepare the response and let the analyst say, yes, do, and then it will even the response, whatever it might be, like shutting down a switch port or locking a user account, will just be done automatically. So that, and then TIP, which is Threat Intelligence Platform, which also will integrate with a SIM. These are two great capabilities that are really improving security operations by making them more agile, more responsive, and ridding analysts of the drudgery that can be so boring and time consuming.
Well, certainly there's been a lot of advances. I appreciate you sharing those, but really, with the technological advances, they don't really help if the organization itself can't stay ahead of the threats out there. It's not just a technology problem. It can also be a process problem. It can be a culture problem. But from your perspective, what would be some of the things that organizations can do to stay ahead of these rapidly changing cybersecurity threats out there?
Well, Greg, cyber warfare is asymmetric and it's kind of guerrilla warfare. So, by definition, we're never going to really completely catch up, right? Because the minute we do, then our adversaries come up with something new. And that's what they have to do for their attacks to be successful. And catching up and staying caught up is what we have to do to keep all of the old and the new kinds of attacks at bay and to reduce their probability and impact. But still, threats and safeguards continue to move forward, and to stay current on threats, it's important for organizations to devote some time in cybersecurity to continuous learning and education, so that the right personnel are at least aware of what's knowable today. And given that there are so many different specialties and subspecialties in cybersecurity, that learning is going to vary a lot based on what you do in cybersecurity. If you're in the GRC space like I've been in for 20 years, then it's staying on top of laws, regulations, standards, even court cases at times, to understand where are the legal precedents taking all of us. And everyone needs to curate their own learning program, whether they have things pushed into their inbox or whether they routinely log into some learning platform like Cybrary, and there's a lot of other ones, getting things like CISA advisories and so forth. I mean, there's so much learning opportunity out there. And again, given the pace of change in our industry, it's important to dedicate consistently at least a few hours every week just to stay current on what's happening in the world. And that learning is only just to stay relevant and informed in your job. If you want to get a different job in cybersecurity, then you're going to need to do more learning on top of that.
And to build on top of that, certainly within industries, pretty much every industry and then some out there have sector-specific information security and analysis centers, or ISACs. Just quickly, do you have any opinion on ISACs?
Well, different people in the organization I work in are the ones engaged with the ISACs because they're rather tactical. I understand and appreciate how they do it, but down in the details, not my job, it's their job. So I let them do their job. But I've been in and heard a lot of discussions about the ISACs among cybersecurity professionals for years. And what I've heard is that some of them are really great and others not so much. I'm not going to name names, in part because I don't want to besmirch anybody. And I also just don't remember which ones the good ones are and which ones the not so good ones are.
Well, fascinating discussion, Peter. Always appreciate having you back to help us unpack some of the things going on in technology. It's certainly been an interesting journey so far from the information security space, and I part of me is looking forward to the future, and part of me, when I see like automated taxis and robots and all that, I'm like, I get a little bit scared about what we see with technology coming. But technology works for us; we don't work for it. So, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today.
My pleasure, Greg. Good to see you again. Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more cutting-edge discussions and tech insights on Tech Talk, only on Now Media TV.
¿Tiene un carro, camioneta o SUV viejo en su casa? Aunque no funcione y piense que es chatarra, usted puede llamar al número en pantalla y donarlo a Susan G. Komen para ayudar a salvar una vida. Nuestro personal calificado va hasta su domicilio a recogerlo de forma totalmente gratis. La donación de su automóvil, camioneta o SUV viejo ayuda a apoyar a las personas afectadas por el cáncer de mama, así como también al trabajo vital de Komen en investigación, atención al paciente y educación. Necesitamos su ayuda. Tal vez considere que su auto viejo es chatarra o que no vale nada, pero ese auto no deseado es importante para que Susan G. Komen continúe ayudando a las personas con cáncer de mama. Llame al número en pantalla hoy. Iremos a recoger su auto rápidamente. También recibirá una deducción de impuestos por su donación caritativa. Ayúdenos a ayudar. Llame ya.
Hi, I'm Vicki Wright Hamilton, and welcome to Ignite. Are you ready to fuel the fire within you and ignite your passion for leadership and business growth? This show isn't just about tips and tricks. It's about transforming your ambition into unstoppable momentum. We're here to spark the strategies that set your soul on fire and help you blaze a trail of success. Whether you're building a startup or leading a team, Ignite will empower you to turn your vision into a powerful reality. Fuel your fire, ignite your passion, and watch your success take flight. Tune in to Ignite right here on Now Media TV.
We're back with Tech Talk, where we continue to dive deep into the innovations that are transforming industries and reshaping the world, only on Now Media TV.
Welcome back to Tech Talk. We're pleased to have Jim Bradfield back. As you remember, Jim joined us recently and talked a little bit about his family's history being in the wireless industry for over 100 years. Jim, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So as we talked about before, we briefly touched a little bit about how wireless networks were supporting robotics and automation, how it's being implemented now in almost every industry. In fact, I just saw where you can buy your own personal robot maybe in a couple of years for like $20,000 to $30,000. But obviously,
Wow.
we've got yes, I think it's a Tesla thing actually, but we'll see.
Goodness.
I'm almost tempted to say that these are not the droids that I was looking for, but we will go there right now. We'll talk a little bit about security risks, because obviously there's going to be a lot more security risks with regards to every time that we increase our technology use. So let's take a little bit step back, talk a little bit more about your company again, kind of picking up from where we left off last time. How long has your company been involved in the security aspects of networks? And nowadays, what kind of issues do you see your clients experiencing with cybersecurity?
So we started in security when basically what it was just, going around and checking people's logins and passwords and making sure that the logins and passwords were, not Jim Bradfield, kind of thing, right? Or, my birthday or, today's date or whatever. And making sure that they didn't have little stickers on their computer that said their password and all that kind of thing. And then, we ended up working with, in the early 2000s, we got a lot of work with the city of San Francisco. And, that there was really no cybersecurity kind of thing back then. That really wasn't a thing. I mean, some people knew about it, but, it really wasn't around. And so really what it was the password and making sure that, passwords were secure and things were secure on the network and whatever, from internal people messing them up. Well, it turns out that we helped them build a fiber WAN and their fiber WAN network that were, I think it was used by about 65 different people. 65 different departments within the city and county of San Francisco. And, it turned out that the guys that we worked with, he got disgruntled somehow. And boy, I'll tell you, he kept the passwords and wouldn't let the city and county, his bosses enter him or get into him or even let him know what they were. I mean,
I remember that. I remember that. That was a couple of years before I became CEO for Nashville, and that was still a major topic that we talked about as far as like city security and government security.
Yeah.
That yes, he left, he was disgruntled, and yet he took the keys to the kingdom with him.
Yeah, the keys to the kingdom. Exactly right. And that's exactly what he did. I mean, basically, basically he hijacked them for about, it was only 2 weeks. It was like 10, 12, 14 days, whatever. It wasn't a very long period of time. And it turns out that he was hiding his background and some other kinds of things. But, basically what he did was instead of actually putting the passwords and backups, in some sort of secure environment or anything like that. I mean, he basically set the routers up to basically store the configurations in the memory instead of on the hard drive. So, imagine if the power goes out or something like that, boom, it's gone, because
Right.
he didn't save, he didn't do that. Remember the old days when you had to make sure you had save? Well, you still do, but he didn't save.
I was trying to remember the CLI, the command line interface command for saving the config in the Cisco router, and I can't. Maybe it was just save. I don't remember.
Right save,
Oh, there you go. Okay, I was close.
Yeah. And so he didn't write save. All he did was put it on there. And, if it had a power outage, which you would have back in those days, because there were no real backup systems. We had UPSs and some other kinds of things, but really nobody had a giant backup, really. And so if that had gone away, the whole city would have gone out and there would be no way to get into the network. They would have had to basically trash the whole thing. Well, that's exactly what, they tried. The city tried really hard, and we actually worked with Gavin Newsom, and he brought us in because we had done a pretty good job for them early on in the development of the network. So he brought us in and he said, hey, let's see what we can do. So, we tried to reverse engineer a whole bunch of stuff and go back through everything. And, this guy had done such a really good job of messing with this equipment that we couldn't do anything. So, and they didn't just have us, they had Accenture and all kinds of other people. And, it cost them about $1 million, maybe a little bit under $1 million, 900,000. Right. But anyway, that was kind of a drag, and so they ended up settling with this guy, and, and he got the shaft and got in prison for a while and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, that was kind of our start of, how do we doesn't get multiplied throughout the rest of the cities and counties and everything. So we started doing a bunch of work with cities and counties and all those kind of things. And like you said, with the CISO for Nashville, same kind of thing, right? We worked with you guys to make sure that, because you can't get to everything, and they had us figuring out how to make things happen. And then, we eventually worked from there. We did a lot of healthcare systems, and one of actually a really big healthcare system provider in Santa Barbara, essentially what they did was they called us in and they said, let's do an audit like you would do. You would have us come in to certify an audit, right? Well, we certified the audit and gave all the documentation to everybody. And so when they went to go renew their insurance, and all that, the insurance company took a look at the docs and said, great, you're good. Well, not so much, because after that happened, probably shortly thereafter, I'm going to say a few months, they had a breach of about, I think, 25,000 patient records, which is a lot, and fined like $25 million. And the insurance company looked at our documentation and said, oh, okay, well, you're all good. So we'll eat the fine. Well, but then the insurance company, being smart, said, bring these guys back in here and let's do another audit. Well, turned out that the IT guy who was in charge of all this stuff didn't air gap the stuff that he was supposed to. In fact, he was working from home most of the time. So he left the back door open, and he didn't he didn't have any security on his own home network.
And that brings up a couple of good points there too. First of all, that things can change. An audit is not going to guarantee future security. It's a moment in time. You're looking at things as they were, and so sometimes things can change. Or to your point too, sometimes I don't know if this was the case, but I would imagine that maybe the IT person thought that their setup was out of scope because it was just basically a VPN connection in, and you almost are inherently going to think that an IT person would keep their system secure on their home side coming in. And sometimes that's not the case. It's easier said than done to do something like that. So um, eventually you found the backdoor issues and were able to satisfy
Yeah,
closing.
we found everything that we went through, every step that we had gone through before, and
Uh-huh.
found the back door. And I mean, it was really simple. He had just left an opening for him to be able to connect remotely from outside, and all the stuff, where the records are kept is supposed to be air gapped, and obviously was not, right. And so they didn't have any security. It's sad, but they ended up having to repay the 25 million bucks, and that was kind of a big deal. And
Oh, they had to repay the insurance company
yeah,
back for the, oh, wow, because they realized that there was a back door there actually.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
And so, and that's kind of a big deal. And then, we've had several other kinds of things. I mean, we had a Hawaiian healthcare system that kept getting hacked and all that. And it turned out that it was a really simple thing. They were getting phished, right? So they were they only had like 9 employees in this healthcare insurance exchange, right? And they were getting phished, and they would click, and somebody's asking for their password or whatever, and sure, no problem. These guys are nice as can be. They're just giving everybody whatever they wanted, and all these patient records got exposed. And I mean, it was a nightmare. So we helped them with figuring out how to do phishing attacks, and pen tests and all kinds of things like that for them. And
But
so
why do phishing attacks still work though? You would think that in this day and age that with all of our awareness training, we would have like slayed that beast.
because what happens is you don't see, if you don't look at it very carefully, it looks like it's exactly from the right people, number one. Number two, what happens is they don't pay attention to it, and they're hurried up. And somebody's going, hey, send me, you're quick. I logged myself out. Oh my God, what do I do? Give me the server, bing, dong, and they're in. I mean, it's just that simple. And the only thing that people can really do for that is, don't do that. And they have to get, training from somebody, from before, or somebody, and make sure that they don't do that. Make sure that they're aware of phishing attacks. And just, people get nailed all the time. And that is what happens to manufacturers, right? All the stuff that's in the manufacturing, all the robotics that we kind of talked about the other day, it happens on the farms. It happens in manufacturing plants. It happens just about everywhere. It's really a big deal. And, I know your normal CISO podcast thing, that's a big deal. Talking about farmers and all those poor guys that have absolutely no, imagine if you're trained and you get fished. Imagine if you're a farmer, and how would he know? And
exactly.
How would he know that he's not secure, and all of these kind of things? And they can disrupt the food supply, and a lot of guys got hacked during COVID because there was nothing for anybody to do but sit there and hack everybody, and all these guys kind of got hacked. And
idle time is the devil's something or another, right?
Oh yeah, man, it's it's brutal. And then you take a look at all the manufacturing robots now, and all the robots. See, almost everything is robotic, and you've even got robots in the cars and things like that. And we work with Tesla and some of these guys quite a bit to help them, figure out the wireless networks and all. Well, they're not secure, so the car is subject to hack. When it gets close to the network, boom, it's on the network. Well, if you don't secure the thing, and you can take control of the car and you can drive that thing off the road. I mean, that's more of a, oh, well, look at what I could do kind of thing. Nobody's going to ransomware you for, a car attack, right? but it's
Uh,
still a thing, you know, and
yeah.
it's a big thing in manufacturing plants, an absolutely big thing. You know, the ransomware and all the other kinds of things that happen in those plants with all those robots. And most everything is connected to the network.
Right.
It's IoT stuff is all on the network. They go wherever, and you know, people don't understand. You've got to air gap these networks. I mean, think about all the stuff that can happen to them.
Right. Well, it's definitely a much more confusing world, and I get back to, um, I can see 10 years from now, I have a personal robot that's making me like a drink or something. Not that I drink, so it would be like a cranberry juice, and brings it to me, and the robot gets fished, and all of a sudden the robot's spilling the drink on me. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about robotics and personal robotics next time. Jim, it's been absolutely fabulous having you back. You're always a wealth of information. Love chatting with you.
Yeah, same here, man. Yeah, let's talk about those robotics this time, and I'll make sure that we talk about some farm things, because I know that a lot of the viewers are farmer guys in the area you guys are in. So,
and I can guarantee that every one of the viewers are people who eat. So, so I appreciate you being on, and we'll be right back.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more cutting-edge discussions and tech insights on Tech Talk, only on Now Media TV.
How would you like to go on a 5-star vacation for just $99? We're talking about the quality of a Westgate resort for $99. Not for one night, but for 3 fantastic nights at one of their luxurious destinations across the United States. And you'll even get a free $100 Visa gift card just for making a reservation. We've got some of the choicest destinations that you'll love in the United States that you can choose from for just $99 for a 3-night stay. Take your family, take a special loved one, but get away. Go on vacation with Westgate Resorts. Call now to make a reservation for just $99, and you get a free $100 Visa gift card. Call Westgate right now and book your vacation. Here's the number.
Call 877-930-3491. That's 877-930-3491. Again, 877-930-3491.
Llama a tu amigo Trip Amigo. Una llamada a Trip Amigo te consigue el billete más barato a cualquier destino. Solo dinos a dónde quieres ir y Trip Amigo busca entre cientos de miles de ofertas disponibles en billetes aéreos y hospedaje también. Nuestros clientes ahorran hasta el 75% en las tarifas aéreas y reservaciones de hoteles. Llama ahora mismo. Tu amigo Trip Amigo te consigue los mejores precios de billetes aéreos y hotel.
We're back with Tech Talk, where we continue to dive deep into the innovations that are transforming industries and reshaping the world, only on Now Media TV.
Welcome back to Tech Talk. Now, cybersecurity is an ever-evolving field because technology evolves and the threats evolve, and we have to ensure that the next generation of technology and cybersecurity pros are able to meet the challenge. With me today is Heather Nagle. She is the Interim Executive Director for the Missouri Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to start off by talking about that. Certainly, training the next generation of cybersecurity professionals is something that is critical, and I know that that's something that you're doing right now. Can you talk a little bit about that and about what you're doing at the Missouri Cybersecurity Center of Excellence?
Sure. We know that cybersecurity is not an entry-level field. And so the training for cybersecurity includes a lot of IT basics and also networking basics alongside the computer piece of it, some software development. And we are a nonprofit at the Missouri Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and we are working to get individuals to basically a level of Security Plus where they can take the certification test, CompTIA Security Plus, and from there, then additionally add some communication and some leadership skills atop that in our 1-year program and some experience doing cybersecurity assessments and working on some penetration testing, not as obviously the lead, But in a team of people doing some writing and some requirements and some scope setting. And then the other piece of that is working in our security operations center, so some experience as a SOC analyst in that year. So we think that combination of skills will really help an individual stand out amongst all the other applicants for early jobs in cybersecurity.
Well, you mentioned that there isn't really an entry level for cybersecurity, that you need to have that IT experience background. Just briefly, what does that provide for the candidate that is necessary for them to succeed in the cybersecurity field?
To be a practitioner really means you need to understand the threats that are coming at us and where the vulnerabilities are that those threats are exploiting. And so, within a system that an analyst might be monitoring or within an assessment taking place, to be able to communicate in both technical and people terms will really set an applicant apart. And it's really fundamental, necessary knowledge for new practitioners coming in as they are looking again to differentiate themselves. And we really feel the holistic person is what we're training. And these are fundamental to be able to understand the work as it's going to come. And it is going to evolve too, it's only going to get more complex.
And that's so important in today's job market because, as I understand it, this is probably one of the more challenging job markets that I've seen in my career. Do you see that market changing in any direction anytime soon?
Oh, I'm hopeful. I think that we are going to see expansion in the cybersecurity roles. We see a lot of gap right now in those roles asking for more experience than entry level. That the jobs that are available right now are looking for 3 to 5 years or more experience. And so we're hopeful that with the additional training that we're giving our students, that maybe some shift will take place where we recognize that some of the jobs that are saying we need 3 to 5 years experience maybe don't. And so at least working locally and regionally, we can work with these employers and show them our candidates and their skills. And everything starts somewhere. So we'll start locally and regionally and maybe be able to make an impact in building really clear job requirements so that people in their HR company and within their companies are not asking for the wrong things. So that's another aspect of what we need to do with workforce.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned too that they really need to have as far as the skill set goes, they need to be an advocate for cybersecurity, really, right?
Yeah.
And in order to have that, they need to understand some of the business aspects, some of the soft skills, and all of that. But what are some of the things that maybe not only the cybersecurity professionals, but just a business in general, somebody who is a promoter for cybersecurity in that business, what can they do to help promote, be that advocate for cybersecurity to help secure their business more?
I think that cybersecurity needs to be a part of the culture in terms of what we discuss in our organizations, that we are constantly being attacked and we don't necessarily see it because these cyber attacks to regular people feel very invisible until they're very tangible. Like if someone is locked out of their systems, they become very tangible. And the idea of building discussions around how we're attacked through email and through voicemail and also through text messages, just conversations that are more interesting than our traditional small talk of sports, etc. I think that there can be a lot happening within an organization, and it really does start with human resources being on board with changes needed in the business and the technology and working together cross functionally in teams.
Well, within the organization, I know that sometimes they look at cybersecurity and information security as like the office of no.
Oh, yes.
How can a leader in the security field change that perception? Because really, information security and cybersecurity, we want the business to be able to do what they need to do, just do it more securely.
No, because goes a long way. And I think also that when the difficult no's come, and they will, that the relationship building between the IT and the cybersecurity people and the rest of the organization is very important so that the practitioners are seen as human beings who are doing their best to minimize the risks for the business. and keep the business's doors open and everything operating appropriately. And if they can make fun of themselves also, I mean, if they can call themselves the department and know that makes an idea of we understand we are not making your jobs easier, but we do make possible. And so there's some dialogue there and that is an interesting way to go because it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It is a series of discussions and it is a lot of work taking place in ways that don't necessarily seem like they're going to make changes to the bottom line of the organization. So,
Some sometimes with the smaller businesses, now they don't really have the capability of having a lot of folks there. In fact, I've worked with smaller businesses, still do, and I like the joke that I know you just mentioned that sometimes it's just one person. You could say the department of one. I've called it the department of Greg or dog. So sometimes I'll call myself dog for that reason. But you could still do an awful lot for small businesses, even as just one person. How is it different though? Are there any different approaches for small businesses as far as to get them more aware of what they need to do?
I think so. With small, super small businesses, we'll talk about from one person to 10, and I'm not talking about 10 IT people, I'm talking about 10 total people in the
Hmm.
company. That there's an approach of perhaps they're not doing anything whatsoever, so we can start to talk about the blending of how you behave at home to be more secure and how you behave at work, and that these are behavior based and people based things to do, and not necessarily big technological whiz bang tools that make you secure but your own behaviors and learning and upskilling in this modern digital age of how to behave online. And also you can teach your kids. So that's the approach I like to use is these are things within our grasp that we can do to make ourselves more secure.
Do you see sometimes that by bringing up this is how you can improve your security at home and in your personal life, that kind of helps to ignite the light bulb, so to speak, over people's heads, saying, "Oh, I see now why this makes sense."
It takes, like anything, new message, it takes some conversation more than one time. I think the marketers like to tell us it's 7 times or more we have to touch in a different way, same message before really the eye the eye rolling goes away and the head nodding begins, maybe. Whenever I speak to civic groups, I will sometimes speak with groups of small organizations in a networking group and be the featured speaker. I will usually leave that group with their eyes wide open without intentionally trying to scare them. So the initial, I think we can get their attention. It's there. It's the follow up to make sure we're doing projects that do help make changes in cybersecurity and people's behavior and working with their passwords on multi-factor authentication and then doing their backups and patching their systems and all the things that we talk about when we talk about cyber hygiene as the first step.
And it's so amazing in that really cybersecurity and information security is one place where the 80/20 rule really does apply. In fact, it might even be 90/10. There's not much that you need to do from a basic level it doesn't take much, but it has such great dividends. But a lot of times people don't understand that. So many years ago, the United States federal government, I can't remember exactly the first date of this, maybe it was 2010-ish or somewhere around there, came up with the idea of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which is what October is, which is a great way to help remind people and to provide them with information. What are some of the strategies that businesses can use to leverage Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
Oh, yes. It is October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So that's a really good topic to bring up, Greg. There are ways we can interact with computers and technology that, again, massively diminish the attack surface of our individual and our businesses and our homes. And so these basic cyber hygiene practices, I'll list a few of them. They have to do with passwords and managing passwords because I don't know how many accounts you have, but I'm upwards of 400 different online accounts I
Oh
have to
my
manage.
goodness. Yeah, absolutely. It's just incredible the number of accounts that we have out there nowadays.
So the best practice of working with something like that is a password manager. And so I
Right.
only have to memorize the passwords I manually have to type in each day. And the rest of those can be super strong and managed beautifully in my password manager. And then multi-factor authentication is probably the most important. The password is not enough anymore. So talking about multi-factor authentication and good ways to do that. We could spend 45 minutes on this, so I'll rest on those two. If you're just going to make two changes, manage your passwords and add multi-factor authentications. If you have time for two more, make sure your computer's operating systems and software are patched. And to do that, you have to know what computers and software you have. So even at home or in a small business, knowing what those things are and then backing up your data. So those are the big four, in my opinion. If you want to start somewhere, that's where you start.
That's awesome. It's great advice for folks that not only for their business, but for their personal life as well, too, because really you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert in order to secure your systems. You just need to do a few simple things, and that'll get you the majority of the way there. We always say in information security and cybersecurity that no system is totally secure, because the only way that that happens is if you can't access it, and then it's useless, right?
Yes.
Well,
And
Heather,
then, do you
go
have
ahead.
30 more seconds?
30 more seconds.
Those four things will also help you realize that you have more work to do. I like to say if we're all playing a game of Super Mario, there's always another princess and another castle, and every bit of awareness and better thing we do, we need to feel like we have more to do. So that's where I want to leave it. Do those four things